How many times have we had this conversation? I thought we were done with this. I thought colleges got the memo that protests were not going to be tolerated. Well, as you can see, they didn't get the memo. And they want to believe, or they at least want you and I to believe, that these things are like somehow organically gathered students protesting on campus. They're not. In fact, Barnard College here in New York, a lot of these folks don't even attend the school campuses that they're arrested on. Today, the White House announced the deportation of the first student on an educational visa linked to these Hamas protests on college campuses. All right, getting somewhere. They haven't told us who it was yet, but the State Department did confirm that they are gone. Also today, the Trump administration announced it's now going to withhold $400 million from Columbia University for failing to quell the takeover of school buildings by these protesters. And just like that, all of a sudden, they expelled 4 kids pending a disciplinary action. Weird how that $400 million really talked, huh? I mean, what did you expect? Name me one thing Trump hasn't followed through with. Education Secretary Linda McMahon said Friday, quote, universities must comply with all federal anti-discrimination laws if they're going to receive federal funding. For too long, Columbia has abandoned that obligation to Jewish students studying on its campus. For the first time in my life, I think the DOE just did something right. All last year, we had some of America's most prestigious universities just allowing kids. These are kids. They're taking over buildings, sometimes violently. They're breaking stuff. They shut people down from going to classes. And Trump had had enough. He said this.
We will deport the foreign jihad sympathizers, and we will deport them very quickly, and Hamas supporters will be gone.
Yeah, basically, you elect me, these shenanigans are over. And generally, I think our education system actually in its entirety is pretty much a scam, especially college. Look, I don't have a college degree because when I got out of the military, I took one semester and realized, wow, the fundamental structure of the entire educational pipeline is completely misplaced on its priorities. These Hamas protests they're just the symptom of the larger problem. And sometime between when I was a kid to now, we went from teaching kids how to launch rockets into space, cure rare diseases, outcompete other nations. Heck, we used to teach kids how to do their own laundry, change a car tire and a battery, or do their own taxes even. We used to teach them cursive and long division and multiplication tables, useful stuff. Now we have Common Core math that takes 4 times as long to do. Home ec has been completely deemed sexist. Wood shop has been banned, and they've replaced actual gym class with the lowest common denominator for the least athletic kid in there. And the latest fad in this unofficial major is activism, with the pro-terrorist being the latest flavor. And the Department of Education, via student loans that they will literally hand to anyone, has in part funded and even facilitated this. Look, I hate the Department of Education. Since its inception back in 1980, Jimmy Carter, we've gone from, number 1 in education to 40-something. We have less applicable majors, less critical thinking, and more activism, of which these universities just seem to sit idly by and allow these kids to do whatever they want on campus. In fact, there's not a single metric that anyone can point to. There's not a single line item that anyone has been able to point to and say, hey, Carl, this is what the Department of Education has made better. They may have made colleges better off from an administrative standpoint because they're getting funding, but they've given kids unfettered access to take out huge loans. They may have funded all kinds of programs that never could have been funded otherwise, probably for a reason. But this huge flow of money from the Department of Education has taken away the core principles of education and what college is for, which is to get a job. 25% of kids graduating high school today, many headed into these universities right now, are functionally illiterate. The reading proficiency rate in America, 4th graders are at 31%, 8th graders at 30%, 12th graders at 37%, and we keep feeding this machine. Have you noticed, though, that the more we put into this budget, the further it strays? I mean, it's unbelievable. The DOE's original budget was $14.2 billion. They had $6.5 billion for elementary and secondary education, $4.5 billion for higher education, largely Pell Grants and student loans. My, that is bloated. $1 billion for handicap education, and another $800 million for vocational and adult education. Here's the real kicker. In its original inception, the administrative costs were not to exceed $200 million for staffing and operations with 3,400 employees. That has quadrupled today. They have nearly $800 million just in payroll and benefits, and there's some overhead line items in there. They don't actually educate a single child. Think about that. Not one. They don't teach a single class. They just give money to other people to run crazy agendas, oftentimes that are completely unaccounted for. Their total budget is now $175 billion with over 5,000 employees. And with all those people, they couldn't find not one person in that agency over the last year to stop the funding of this type of anarchy. Not one of those people before Trump thought, hey, man, we should defund these colleges for allowing students to run around campus calling Trump supporters Nazis while covering their faces, keeping Jewish students from attending classes. Hey, that's why I want to get rid of this place. It's like the irony on campus here. Clearly, none of that money we were giving them was going to a history class. Keep in mind, the average employee at the Department of Education makes $110,000 a year. Again, they don't teach anybody anything. Only in the United States government could you get paid almost double the median salary of America to facilitate colleges that have wannabe terrorists running around and breaking stuff. Did you know Columbia, with a $14.8 billion growing endowment, it's tax-free, by the way. They're not paying any taxes on that. Not only should we stop funding them, we should take their nonprofit status because of this stuff. You can go down the list. All these places also had similar protests. They were keeping Jewish kids out of classes last year. Colleges, massive endowments. $53.2 billion at Harvard. Their president, Claudine Gay, even refused to acknowledge these anti-Jewish protests were even happening. And the university didn't do anything until their donors cut off their donations. $41.5 billion at Yale, $34.1 billion at Princeton, $21 billion at the University of Pennsylvania, $13.3 billion at Columbia University. Yet all of those universities, as I just mentioned, received a cumulative $5.2 billion in federal funding last year. Why? It doesn't even include the lost revenue to the taxpayer by allowing them to be that nonprofit. So cutting $400 million seems like a great, easy way to start for me. I don't care what it's for. I would argue that if there is any need for federal government in our education system, specifically colleges, it would be on pricing. These colleges charge increasingly more every year. Like undergrad now costs like $250 grand, while places like Yale have more administrators than undergrads. And not one of those administrators was able to keep kids safe on campus. One girl over there got hit in the face with a flagpole just trying to go to class. Academia has become this like self-perpetuated, bloated monster. These kids protesting, if they even go to that college, don't seem to me to be going there to get a degree in anything serious. Maybe they're to major in like philosophy or gender studies or whatever, but these kids today are not doing college properly because we've allowed them to not do it that way. They're going to these colleges and being taught and even encouraged to protest whatever the flavor of the day is. This is just the latest one. And they're getting paid by money coming out of our pockets, our hard-earned paychecks. So if these universities want to teach kids about the real world, fine, okay? Like, do whatever you want, but do it without my money. And if they need to raise tuition, great. I hope they do. And I hope these parents are like, hey, dude, I'm not paying for that anymore. If they're going to teach you to hate America, forget about it. This is the reckoning time of this unaccountable academia and their professors that have never worked a day outside of their university bubble.
He loves the Constitution. He fights for what's right. He hates the bad guys. He's a freedom warrior. He's your freedom warrior. Watch Carl Higbie every weekday on Newsmax.